Hey lot, Brass Polish here, aka Lister of Smeg. If you used to call me Lister, it's fine, don't worry about it, but the reason I changed all my information as much as I could, except for DeviantArt, to Brass Polish is because the more notoriety I got, the more people were calling me Lister, the more I realized how uncomfortable I am being called that. So, since at the time I had like under 200 watchers on DeviantArt and under 100 subscribers on YouTube, I figured the more people come to my channel and my gallery, the more people will call me Brass rather than Lister. I just wanted to forge my own identity, really. So, it was 2 years ago today I put up my first MLP episode review, Thanks for the Memories. 2 years on, I'm not embarrassed by it, but I certainly have gone up in quality since then. I can still rewatch it and get some amusement out of it. I'm not sure at one point I started to find my feet, but I'm having fun reviewing MLP stuff. So for my 2-year anniversary, I figured I'd do a Q&A for the first time. For the first time on my Brony channel anyway. So I've gotten a few bites. I'll start with the one question on DeviantArt, which is from Bright Idea. Now she asks 2 questions. How did you get your cutie mark? I've got a rough first draft of a story here. I'll just open it up. Cutie mark backstory. Yeah, I started to write this up and then just, yeah. I had a full sitter as a colt who got me into steam locomotives and railways. I was always drawing pictures of steam engines for her. And one evening I went to watch a Western Region 7800 named Windermere Manor carry an express passenger train up the steep hill to Clopley Hill. I sat on the hillside along with several other train spotters, and as the train approached, there was a loud noise, and the engine came to a stop. It turned out the crew thought they'd hit a detonator and had to stop, but that turned out to not be the case. After a while, there appeared to be no danger. No one had any idea what that noise was, and I checked the dates. It wasn't that Sonic Rainbow Dash made. But with Windermere Manor stopped on the hill, it looked like she'd have to go back down and take a run at it, which would make her really late. The crew called to the train spotters that they were going to take a stab at recommencing the journey right where they are. And Windermere Manor was having a terrible time getting the heavy coaches up the hill. Her wheels were slipping like mad, and I heard a lot of train spotters murmuring about how she'd need a banker. The thing is, I'd researched the 7800s, and they were designed to carry heavy loads over heavy gradients, and they weighed less than 70 tons, so they had a great route availability. Also, I saw a documentary on the Baltimore and San Palomino Joint Railway, and I remembered something said by one of the drivers. A steam locomotive is the closest thing a mechanical can get to being a living thing. It eats, it drinks, it breathes, its performance varies by treatment. So I started calling, "Keep going, Windermere Manor, you can do it," and stuff like that. And a bunch of ponies around me started shouting words of encouragement as well. And not so much to the crew, but to the engine herself. And as the shouting sort of spread along the hillside and got louder and louder, the train gained momentum and reached the peak of the climb. I was so impressed, and I went up to the yard at Clopley Hill to visit the engine. I found out that the train had arrived on time, but that Windermere Manor was to spend the night in the siding. On one hoof, I could get a good close-up look at her. On the other hoof, it seemed like a poor reward for triumphing after a delay, sitting in a siding all night. So I was standing around during the night in the siding. I was friendly with a lot of the railway staff, and they were okay with me hanging around. And I wanted to do something to express my admiration for this cool engine. I saw that her brass safety valve bonnet and copper funnel weren't looking the best. And I remember some pony telling me that copper and brass can actually be polished using brown sauce, HP sauce. So I went to the station restaurant, grabbed a bottle of it and a few napkins, went back to the siding and gave the engine's brass and copper bits a good wipe. And then I got a bit sleepy and went back home to bed. Not really knowing what my work had ended up looking like in the dark. I had a ticket to a rail tour, leaving for Canterlot in the morning, and she looked immaculate. Everyone on the platform was admiring her appearance, and I felt something, and I looked at my ass, and there was my cutie mark. Bored yet? And the other question Bright Idea asks is, what's your favorite non-pony character on the show? That's a tough one, because there's a lot I like, but I wouldn't really call any of them favorites. I am wondering if we're going to see more zebras later on. That would be interesting. I think it'd be kind of interesting if there were unicorn and Pegasus varieties of zebras. Like Zecora is an earth zebra. That'd be interesting. I guess I like Spike in Discord. Spike because, you know, he's had the most exposure and he's gotten some pretty good treatment in recent episodes. And Discord because thankfully he's not a big pain in the ass anymore. That guy, I was really pissed off about the way What About Discord ended, but his appearances in Season 6 and so far in 7 have been okay. Okay, let's move on to my YouTube questions. So first we got Rose Pal. Top 5 MLP episodes? That's a tough one. But Season 5, I just can't pick. Because Season 5 dropped so many bombshells on us. The map, Starlight, the Crusaders getting their cutie marks, the Griffins, Moon Dancer, Big Mac and Drag, Cholera. I'm going to say it's kind of a toss-up between Castle Sweet Castle and Crusaders of the Lost Mark. Favorite cartoons as well as MLP? For a time I was big into Phineas and Ferb, but then the quality started to drop. That's actually one of the reasons I got into MLP. Phineas and Ferb was on the way down, and I was exposed to a lot of hype and thought maybe it's high time I got into this. I'm not that big a cartoon guy, I guess. I like cartoons, but there's not a lot I consider my favorite shows. I guess I prefer live action. A lot of my favorite shows are live action. Thomas the Tank Engine, Tugs, It Ain't Half Hot Mum, QI, Red Dwarf, Blackadder, Mrs. Brown's Boys. Well, I like The Simpsons as well. But everyone does. DC or Marvel? I don't know. I'm not a big comic guy either. Whichever one Batman is, I don't know. Doughboy123X, do you have any experience with the previous generations of My Little Pony? There's two things I can recall. I remember I was at my babysitter's and the TV was on and there was something resembling a My Little Pony thing. I'm guessing it was one of the previous generations of My Little Pony. I remember these two ponies just wandering around through a town, and they meet someone, they have a brief chat, then the third one fucks off, and one of the first two says, "We make a new friend every day." And I do remember losing interest very quickly. And the other one, I think I was a little older then, but I'm not sure. There was a time when McDonald's had My Little Pony things in their Happy Meals, and my dad took a look at this one my sister got. He's looking at it while he's driving. He goes, "This is gay." I pissing myself laughing. DJ Silverwing asks, will you possibly make shorts on your OC? I might adapt a few stories I've written. What are they? The First of the Winter Wine and Keeping Evie Full Time. But I don't plan to right now. I'm not going to roll it out though. And he also asks, favorite reviewer? It's kind of a toss-up between Toon Critic and Keyframe. You could probably tell from all the fan art. And finally, we got C5's Non-Elemental Harmony, who's got a few questions. What or who was your inspiration to start making MLP videos? That would be Silver Quill. In April 2015, I had a rough week of studying for exams and prepping for my driving test. And I turned to after the fact videos to steady my nerves, and it was very helpful. And I saw his collab with KP, and that bit at the beginning with all those reviewers at that piss up. I'm like, God damn, there's a lot of these guys. And yeah, creating a Pony Sona and reviewing episodes looked like fun. I figured I'll take a stab at it. And I wanted to do it in a way that made me feel comfortable, and something I did in the Thomas fandom was I basically just did what this guy Darth Ratbat did, and just did a riff tracks kind of thing. And eventually, when the fair use campaign came about, I learned that talking over entire episodes isn't cricket. So I trimmed them later on, and now my episode reviews are around 10 minutes long. Anything you feel you've learned, or any particular new experience you got from working on this channel? Well, like I said, I learned about trimming the videos so they don't run the full length of the episode. And I've used a few Sony Vegas tools for the first time since I started reviewing stuff. Last year I got into doing shorter opinion pieces, and I'll say something I learned after this was from my very first one. Don't put a question mark in your title. I was stuck for a title, and I still kind of am. I just settled for Disney Princess, Twilight, and I knew I didn't want that, but I could not think of a good one. The obvious title would have been Has Twilight Gone Disney Princess, and that was just a puke-inducing title to me. But I really can't think of anything for that one. So yeah, I do my best not to ask questions in my titles. The same is true of newspaper headlines. My rule is if a headline in a news article has a question mark in it, it's not news. Ramble about your OC? Okay, that's not a question, but I am curious about your character. Around the time I decided to dip my hoof in this pie, I had steam engines on the brain, and my title was called Lister of Smeg BP. BP at that time stood for Bonfire Productions, and I figured, well, maybe I'll give myself a name like that, with those initials. There were two candidates, Brass Polish, after my love of Great Western engines, and Swindon machines are famous for their photogenic copper chimney tops and brass safety valve bonnets. Or the other one was Box Pock, which is a sort of wheel that Oliver Bully didn't really invent, but more introduced to the UK. In the UK, they're actually called BFBs. But around that time, the Steam Locos and Profile episode covering the Halls came about, so I had the Great Western on the brain, and I just thought, yeah, I love the Great Western. I'm going to name my character Brass Polish. And so I colored him green and yellow, not blonde. And the eyes came afterwards, because I figured they should probably be dark. And so I tried brown first, and it turned out they looked fine, and they are my actual eye color. And they kind of balance things out a little bit, so I kept it, and I've subsequently learned that a lot of people have a down on green and yellow. I didn't originally use Flim and Flam as a base. I sort of went for the ordinary stallion pose, like, Dr. Hooves, Comet Tail, Soren, those kind of ones. And my original design was basically, it had the same mane and tail. It was a Pegasus, and it had the beard and the same cutie mark, but I looked at it and thought, it's just not me as a pony, is it? And I was thinking, well, apart from the beard and the hair, because I had long hair at the time, what else is there about me besides my long hair? And a lot of people say to me, my Christ, you're tall, something like that. So I figured, okay, I'll make them taller, and Flim and Flam came to mind, so I used them as a base, and attempt number 2 was the Brass Polish you know today. And his final question, and speaking of your OC, who did the vectors for him? I've been looking to commission vectors for my OC. A guy about my height, my complexion, and goes by the name of me. Yeah, I do most of my own stuff. I do use pre-existing vectors of pre-existing characters, just as a way of streamlining the process of making videos and comics and stuff. But I don't work on commissions, because I think if I started working on this kind of thing for money, it'd end up feeling like an obligation to me rather than a hobby. And making videos and writing stories to me is a hobby. The closest thing I've done to a commission recently is I did something for a Quill Stroke, and she said it'd feel weird not paying me for it. So what I did was I suggested she makes a donation to the Cock of the North project. But every other request I've done for Sunday Night Fan Art or for some little bit for a guy's video, it's always been a free service. So I did some bits and bobs for Toon Critic and Dr. Wolf, and no charge. So yeah, I don't work on commissions really, but I'm not going to rule anything out. At some point, I might decide to help people create pony sonas for themselves, and I'll probably do the same thing I did with Krill Stroke. Just ask them to donate to things like the Great Western Night Owl Project, anything railway related. Because chances are, if I did charge for stuff, that's probably where the money would end up going anyway. I don't know if you picked up on this, but I love British steam engines. Well, that's all of them. I'm Brass Polish. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your questions.